Alright YouTube, so we are back of course to talk about some Final Fantasy VII Remake, and what we have today is a couple days ago, Square Enix kicked off like a new interview series for FF7 Remake over on FinalFantasy.com. We don't know how many parts there's going to be, but this one is titled as Part 1, so there's going to be at least a second one. And if I had to speculate on when the next one would come out, usually how Square Enix does these things is a week apart. When it came to like the surveys we looked at, those were exactly a week apart when they came out. When they used to do like concept art on Twitter back before the game ever launched, they used to always drop it on the same day a week. So more than likely, the next one will come out next Wednesday, on the 12th. But more specifically, why I wanted to look at this particular interview is because it gives us a lot of background info, background lore, things you wouldn't even think to ask. Stuff like Moggy, for example, the kid you trade the Moogle medals to. Where does he get his items from? Where does he get his supplies from? To actually answer that. But before we hop into it, a couple of smaller bits of news. For starters, Remake is on sale right now up until August 19th, so another like 12 days or so, almost 2 weeks. You can get the game for as low as like $40. Which I believe is like the lowest it's ever been. There might have been some Amazon deals prior to the game's release where you could get it to about as low as $40, but it's still a pretty damn cheap price for a relatively new game. So that's there for somebody that's kind of waited to pick up the game, been waiting for some sort of a sell. $40 is pretty good. And speaking of buying the game, Final Fantasy VII Remake through physical and digital sales has reached over 5 million sales. And I do want to touch on something hopefully really quickly. We talked before about the launch of the game. I thought the sales at the time weren't that good. A lot of people said it was like the biggest PS4 exclusive launch ever. 5 million is a fantastic number. A lot of games don't even see that high of sales. And it's like the biggest Square Enix game digitally on PS4 ever. I feel like the game has underperformed to some degree. Like, I personally thought it would sell better. I feel like in Square Enix's eyes, they thought it was going to do better, and maybe COVID has affected that. But just for comparison's sake, in the first 24 hours, Final Fantasy XV sold 5 million copies in the first day. And obviously the game launched on multiple different platforms, so that helps boost the sales, but we're talking about 1 day versus 4 months, and they're just now catching up to the first day of Final Fantasy XV. If you want to use a different game as another comparison, another PS4 exclusive, Spider-Man PS4, I believe, had the biggest PS4 exclusive launch up until Remake, sold about 9 to 10 million copies in the first 2 months versus, again, 4 months, and we're only about half that. And to kind of further add on to this, when it comes to the sell that's happening right now, they actually changed their Twitter like cover photo to help promote the sell, to try to push sales of the game. And I think that just kind of adds to the whole narrative here that maybe the game didn't do as good as they wanted it to. And there's a lot of factors working against it. You have, for one, a staggered story. It's not the full FF7 story. A lot of people don't like that. It's a very different style of game than the turn-based RPG that the original game was. And of course, there's a lot of changes to the story. It's not the same FF7 story from the original game. A lot of people don't like that as well. There's a lot of factors working against the game. And of course, coronavirus. That people just aren't going out and buying games as much. People don't have as much money to spend. And to be clear, we're not hating on the game. We're just talking numbers and stats, man. But we need to move on from this. This is almost its own video. And we got something else we need to talk about. So anyways, on to this interview with Toriyama. They ask, "We were surprised to hear main theme of Final Fantasy VII playing in the Sector 7 slums. Was there a reason for that song choice?" He says, "In FF7 Remake, you return to the Sector 7 Undercity many times, and we intended for it to serve as your central hub over the course of the story, so we wanted to feel like home. A cozy place you could come back to. To that end, we chose to use main theme of Final Fantasy VII, which played on the world map in the original game, there. Final Fantasy VII Remake takes place solely in Midgar, but we didn't limit its soundtrack to songs originally only heard within the city. Instead, we utilized tracks from throughout the original that fit certain scenes or areas in FF7 Remake." When it comes to the music of Remake, I think that's one place that I haven't heard anybody complain like at all. I think that's one of the things they definitely nailed. People complain about gameplay and story and all this other stuff, but I think everybody was satisfied with the music they chose. And I definitely appreciated hearing the main theme for Final Fantasy VII in Sector 7 slums. Next, we learn about the drinks that Tifa made at the 7th Heaven. Toriyama replies with, "The first was the popular 7th Heaven, a drink that packs a serious punch and gives you the courage to keep going. Her second creation was a Cosmo Cannon, a burgundy-colored cocktail inspired by the location of the same name. There are also other drinks on the menu at 7th Heaven, such as a Life Stream, which possesses a green hue. Tifa's showmanship with the shaker comes from her natural dexterity and her keen observation that the regulars are more generous tippers when she puts some flair into her bartending." So if you're looking for some deep lore on Tifa and the drinks that she makes at the 7th Heaven, there you go. Next up they ask, "There are so many cats in the Sector 7 slums, is there a cat lover on the development team?" Sector 7's excessive number of cats can be attributed to Wedge. He loves the furry critter so much, he can't help but bring any stray he finds back home with him. As for cat lovers on the dev team, co-director Naoki Yamaguchi is one, so he had his cat rendered in-game. Personally, I want to make sure dog people weren't left out, so we decided to even things out by increasing Midgar's canine population. That's why Morrow, the landlord of the Stargazer Heights, can be seen with her own loyal companion. So, according to Toriyama, all the cats in Sector 7 slums can be attributed to Wedge taking in every single stray he comes across, which I think is awesome. And something I can actually kind of relate to. There's a lot of stray cats where I live at, and I'm the person that feeds them pretty much every single day. But I also like that Toriyama wanted to increase the canine population in Midgar to represent the people who are fans of dogs as well. Wedge's cats seem a little on the large side. Could that be a case of pets resembling their owners? Wedge's cats eat just as much and as often as he does, so any animal in his care is going to grow very quickly. So there's you some Final Fantasy VII Remake deep lore as to why Wedge's cats are so big. This is one of the more interesting bits of info from this interview. Cloud's mother and Tifa's father weren't given names in the original Final Fantasy VII, but how about in Remake? They both had names in the original Final Fantasy VII character design documents, so we decided to use them in Remake. Now Cloud's mother is officially named Claudia, and Tifa's father is Brian. Tifa's dad, however, has no dialogue in Remake, so during development, we refer to him as Dead Body. That's pretty dark, man, referring to Tifa's murdered father as Dead Body, instead of Brian, his name. But it's also pretty funny, but the main thing here, of course, is getting canon names for Tifa's dad and Cloud's mother. Claudia is very close to Cloud, so I'm assuming the idea behind that is maybe that he was named after his mom. But something I'd be interested in, and we talked about it in the comment section of one of my videos, and we make so much content I couldn't possibly reference the video and find the comments, but what's up with Cloud's dad? Like, what happened to is there canon story to his dad? Did his dad die when he was young or before he was born? Did his dad leave when he was young or something like that? Like, what's up with Cloud's dad? What's his name? What's his story? That's something I'd absolutely like them to go into when it comes to Remake. Like, more character development for everybody as a whole, but more specifically, like, why is it just Cloud and his mom in Nibelheim? He had to have a dad. There's not much plant life under the plates of Midgar, but so many flowers bloom around Aerith's house. Is there a reason for that? The large river running through the outskirts of Sector 5's Undercity brings fresh water rich with nutrients from the planet's life stream to both Aerith's house and the dilapidated church. This is the same water Aerith uses to lovingly tend to her flowers. Also, the fact that Aerith isn't ancient could be another reason for the vibrant vegetation there. So the last part is kind of what I always assumed. I always thought that all the plants and flowers growing around Aerith or wherever she's at is because she's an ancient, she has a connection to the planet, magical powers, stuff like that. I guess I never really thought about the water around her house being the main reason. Even in the original game, you had the river and the waterfall in the background of her house, but the fact that it has nutrients from the life stream, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, the life stream would probably be very beneficial to plant life. And I haven't really given a lot of thought to the waterfall in the river next to Aerith's house, but I guess I always assumed it wasn't necessarily fresh water just because it was in Midgar, but if it is and it comes from the life stream, that makes a lot of sense. When trying to sneak out of Aerith's house at night, did the number of obstacles decrease with each failed attempt, or was it just our imagination? Despite being mad at Cloud, Aerith cleans up the mess bit by bit to make it easier for him to sneak out. To give you some behind-the-scenes info, we wanted to spook the player a bit when Aerith scolds Cloud, which is why she sounds so scary when scolding him. Aerith is waiting for Cloud after he leaves anyway, so maybe she was just playing with him. Kind of terrifying when you think of it like that. So I like that they actually gave a lore reason as to why sneaking out of Aerith's house gets progressively easier. It's not just a mini-game that they make easier if you keep failing. Like, as Aerith catches you repeatedly, she actually cleans up and makes it a little bit easier for you to sneak out because she wants you to sneak out because she wants to go as well. Despite being a child, the items Moggy sells are impressive. Where does he get them from? There are plenty of passionate Moogle Metal collectors out there, even among adults, and it's through them that Moggy is able to trade for the rare items he offers Cloud. Moggy is one example of how even kids living in the Sector 5 Undercity are tough and resourceful. There you have it, that's how Moggy gets the supplies he has that you can buy with the Moogle Metals, is from trading them from adults that also collect Moogle Metals as well. It's something I actually thought about when playing the game. It's like, where does this kid get this shit from? And you have your answer. They actually gave a lore reason for it. Isn't Rude unusually nice to women? He kept putting them to sleep in battle. In the original Final Fantasy VII, Rude wouldn't attack Tifa, so he decided that he wouldn't actively attack women in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Of course, battles wouldn't really work if he didn't attack female characters at all, so we made him less aggressive, just putting them to sleep. Rude refusing to attack Tifa in the original Final Fantasy VII was something I actually wasn't aware of until relatively recent years. I never paid attention to attack patterns in games. I didn't look for like Easter eggs and secrets in games back in the day. So that was, when I first learned that, I was like, that's actually really, really in-depth, because in the story, you learn that Rude is really into Tifa, and it makes a lot of sense they would not attack her in-game until she's like the last one alive in her team, I believe. And when it came to the remake, they extended that further to be all females, apparently, so he doesn't attack Aerith either and just kind of puts them to sleep. Pretty cool. These next two are pretty much the exact same. They ask about the Angel of the Slums, Kyrie and Leslie, how they came to be in the remake, and they're all characters from the novel The Kids Are Alright, a Turk's side story, and they just kind of implemented them into the game. They're not super in-depth explanations. We don't really learn anything. But that is something I absolutely love about Remake Part 1, is that they implemented references from just about every part of the FF7 universe. I'm not sure if there's a Dirge of Cerberus reference or not. You guys could tell me that in the comments below. But just about every other thing, like Before Crisis, Crisis Core, Advent Children, there's stuff from just about everywhere. which I think is really good fan service. For people that have been following the entire FF7 compilation, it's nice to put in references from everything. And lastly for this interview, they asked Toriyama, even the background characters out and about in the city have a lot of personality. Do you have a favorite? Toriyama replies with, a great deal of NPC characters and dialogue from the original game, a lot of which I worked on, were repurposed for Remake. That's always fun to see. Of the NPCs, the lovey-dovey couple at the Sector 7 Slums train station is my favorite. To be honest, man, there's a lot of NPCs, a lot of pedestrian background characters in Remake, so I don't really have a favorite one, but I can tell you what I wanted that wasn't in the game is, unless I missed it and you guys can point it out to me, there wasn't a this guy are sick reference or Easter egg in the game. I was really hoping they would just put that in there somewhere. And I don't even recall if there's even like a even remotely sick character in the Sector 5 slums, but that was just super disappointing. I was really like adamantly looking for that with my first playthrough and just couldn't find anything. But anyways, my dudes, this video is super long. We don't often do videos that exceed the 10-minute mark. We try to keep our videos as short as possible, but pretty much every part of this interview is worth discussing and talking about, man. We got a lot of deep lore, as I've said a few times in the video. Actually, there's a lot of interesting stuff that I never would have thought of or known. But of course, we're just going to wrap it up. No reason to make the video any longer than it needs to be. Hopefully next week, I'm assuming it'll be next week when the next interview comes out, it's as good as this or better. Either way, of course, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys already want to did more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on my notifications. Follow me on Twitter at @DashingDavid, at my Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain or leave it like Cobain.